Hello and welcome to UX Leadership by Design, the podcast by and for UX design leaders. I'm Mark Baldino, your host. This podcast is and always will be brought to you by Fuzzy Math, the user experience design consultancy that brings consumer-grade UX to the enterprise. Fuzzy Math delivers award-winning digital product design and partners with internal UX design teams to augment, grow, and scale their impact. I'm also a founder, so I'm really biased about Fuzzy Math, but that's okay. Today, we're fortunate to have Chris Willis, who is the Chief Design Officer at Domo. Chris sees his role not just as a chief design officer, but also as a futurist, combining data, technology, and emerging trends in innovative ways to help make Domo an indispensable platform for its customers. So I'm just warning you, get ready for a slew of amazing advice. This is the down-to-earth practical guidance for anyone looking to have a more impactful design career, but also for design leaders who are looking to grow and nurture their design team, but also have an more impactful career themselves. So, in this case, Chris's role as a futurist is really in helping you future-proof your design career. So please listen and enjoy. Chris, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing well as well. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
To start, would love if you could give the audience a little bit of your background, maybe how you transitioned from a designer to a design lead, and kind of where you are at your career your career now.
Sure. Yeah. I think everyone's creative background is pretty unique. Mine's no exception. I started right out of college. My first job out of college, despite having a computer science minor and a international marketing and finance major, I was an editorial cartoonist. So I'd always pursued art. I'd always pursued technology. This was a long time ago. So this was like I got out of college, '89, around '90, and there was a recession going on. So there was a lot of economic uncertainty, and my parents were really supportive in terms of arts. My mom was an artist. My dad was a musician, but he was also in the technical field. And they said, why don't you just take the time to figure out what you want to do? And so I'd been doing editorial cartoons. I'd been taking studio art lessons. And that really kind of took me on a different journey. And I ended up in journalism. I had no journalism degree, but I ended up doing design, infographics. I redesigned newspapers for some of the biggest newspapers and magazines in the country. And I even started my own magazine in Detroit. It's something called Our Detroit, because I'd been working at the Detroit News.
Oh.
And I had this weird epiphany. There was a point at which I'll never forget this day where, it's almost like the universe is speaking to you, but it sometimes seems somewhat in coded language. I was sitting there trying to figure out how we were going to get the next issue out. And one of our writers was a freelance writer. We did a lot of freelance writing with really good writers. So we didn't have to maintain a big staff. We just kind of outsourced a lot of stuff. And this writer was super well respected, usually super reliable, called in saying, I can't do it. I can't do the cover story. I have a book deal and I'm not going to make it. And so I'm just going to go offline for the next few months.
Wow.
We were 3 or 4 days from printing this magazine and we had no cover story. And that's when our editor said, hey, why don't you go out and write that story about that young startup in Detroit that was doing a bunch of stuff for the auto industry. And so I met these, they were pretty much my age. They were in their 20s. That's where I was. And they were doing, sort of interactive flash CDs, which at the time was a big deal. I don't know if you remember getting, mailers along with your AOL discs in the mail, right? And I spent the time doing that. Yeah, I spent the time doing that. And I came back to the office and I talked to my co-founder and I said, we know how to do journalism. We know how to write. We know how to design. But clearly where the world is going is the world of tech. We need to figure out those skills and quick. And the web was just starting to take off. This is just before Web 1.0 took off. And since then, I found myself in a lot of sort of chief creative positions, in trying to create both practical and tactical products, both in media and in, very different kinds of startups from B2B to B2C, and ended up taking a very, very different journey. And I think, as creatives, we look back on our path and we might say, yeah, that's a little strange, but I can kind of see the line. I don't think there's a path. I think you kind of say yes to things in a creative life and you let that take you on a particular journey. And if it's working, great. But it's really hard to find, I think, um, uh, any one sort of way. Like as let's say,
Yeah.
maybe this is wrong, but medical career, you have to take an MCAT, you have to go into medical school, there's going to be a residency of some sort, there's an outline to where that goes. In the creative life, it can go many different places. And so that's why, like as we're probably going to talk about today, I think it requires a little bit more of a framework of thinking about how to develop your creative life such that when
Mhm.
opportunities arise, you're ready. It's a different mode, I think, than typical career choices. Where I'm at
Yeah.
right now, I started with Josh James and a few others, a company that does business analytics in the cloud, so that people can kind of put data to work in really interesting ways. And we started that about 10 years ago, and I'm the chief design officer there. And that's been just a crazy journey. I could not predict how I got there or where it was going to take me.
In your journey, do you feel like the creative component and the lead component were kind of well, you're in a car, so riding shotgun, or did you like you were kind of always leading and then you became a design lead, or like what was that
Yeah.
path where it was like I'm a practitioner of design, I'm in the creative space too, I'm going to lead, and I'm curious if they like developed at the exact same time over your career, or was leading always something you were doing and the creative kind of leadership came
leading
came a little bit
leading
later.
was definitely something that I was always doing. And the reason I hesitate there is I'm wondering, as I'm saying that, how much of that is kind of an innate personality type, versus something you learn to do. Um, I think there are learnable aspects of it, but I would say, looking back on it, the best people I worked with and the situation I found myself in was always being, for lack of a better term, a creative misfit, right? And sort of finding being an outsider on the inside. Like, I think the best people, those are the people you're looking for to innovate in your organizations. And the best creative types are the ones who take that up to the next level. Meaning, they're not just people who go in there and are disgruntled and skeptical and critical. They're people who channel that into conversations and activities that get people to think about their business
Mm,
differently and think about opportunities differently. So I would say, until I feel like it's been relatively recently, and by recently, you could almost peg it to the rise of Apple and the iPhone, where organizations started to say, "Wait a minute, the biggest company on the planet," because right now Apple's the biggest company by market cap. I didn't check today, but recently, $2.5 trillion market cap. That is
yep.
redonkulous, and the scale and the speed at which companies like that are growing, and the fact that a lot of it seems to be credited to a culture of design and design thinking, right? They still have to get the trains to ship on time. Um, there's logistics, there's
Yeah.
legal, there's engineering, all of that, but they have to come together in a package that is more than just what our previous manufacturing centered world understood, which was build widgets faster, better, cheaper, to how do we create things that people can fall in love with. And that's where design thinking, design leadership really become valuable. And I think a lot of companies are still kind of figuring that out, in many ways. And that's also, um, where the opportunity lies. And so you have to be good at not just the basic skills of design, but you have to have some innate leadership, because you have to lead in lots of different areas, right? You have to be great at selling across the organization. And I think we're really just starting, the to see the rise of design leaders and design leadership in different ways in the organization.
Yeah. You mentioned communication as kind of a core
Mm,
skill selling across the business. Do you have a series of like leadership and UX sort of core or foundational principles that you think are
sure.
required? Maybe both, maybe to do UX, but maybe more importantly to kind of to lead folks.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, that probably encompasses a class of soft skills that you have to be developing. Um, the soft skills, I think, often get overlooked, but let's take sort of the interpersonal skills. Number one on that list is don't be a jerk, right? And you can be a jerk without even realizing that, right? You can be a jerk,
Mm,
not just by maybe mistreating people, or maybe entering a room with a holier than thou type attitude, or it could just be straight up, you're not using the language that they understand, so you're misunderstood and you're seen as part of a problem. So the first thing I would suggest is, working on your interpersonal skills, learning how to have conversations, and learning how to be more of a big ear than a big mouth. And that's difficult, right? That requires some discipline, but understanding that your role in ultimately bringing value to the organization means you have to understand the value of design in the organization. And this is a key thing that I think a lot of potential UX stars miss, which is they don't speak the language of the business. And that comes from not understanding how does the business work. And to understand that, you have to ask the question, how do we make money? Like, how do we make $1 in this company? Where does that come from, right? And that's where I think a lot of creative misfits end up getting severely misunderstood. So understanding how marketing works, how engineering works, the language, the vocabulary of the business. You might understand parts of the business, but if you use the wrong words, you're probably going to be discounted. I worked on Wall Street for a bit, and that was probably the hardest part of my job, was understanding the language, which in many cases in high finance is cloaked to begin with. Language is somewhat weaponized in high finance, right? Because it's both efficient, but it's also a way of protecting your role in the business. And that was really hard because there was no dictionary, right? There was no way to figure that out. But that's not the case in most businesses. Many times, just get good at asking people, say, tell me a little bit, how do we get a lead for a customer? Where does that come from? How do we think about return on investment on our marketing spend? How can we use Jira better? Learn about the basics of GitHub, right? What's a repo, right? How do you merge? How do you fork, right? These little things that are terms that will be thrown around. And what you will find very quickly is that people want to help you. They want to be helpful, and they love to talk about what they do. So there's probably no end of sort of the kindness of strangers within your organization. So I would leverage that. I would also get good at understanding from a leadership perspective that you don't have to have the title to be a good leader. You don't have to be director, manager, VP to be a leader. You can lead in lots of situations. And I think especially for designers, it's important because, as you probably experience on a daily basis, Mark, you're not on the periphery of the project. You're at the center of the project, right? You're the one who has to take the technical constraints, the customer research, the competitive intelligence, and myriad other aspects, and turn that into a design, which is really a hypothesis, right? It's here's how we think about the problem. Here's how we're thinking about the solution to the problem. And that's where I would say the next most important soft skill is, how do you sell ideas? And I think there are ways to sell and ways to be very persuasive that really take practice. So for example, our natural sort of desire to want to own an idea and be original can really hamper what you do, right? So, hey, guess what? I did a bunch of work and I'm going to guard it, and then I'm going to sort of show it, and I'm going to try to make sure that everyone knows that I did this and I want to take credit for it. The way you persuade people, honestly, is to come up with the idea together, or help them think that that idea was their idea, right? So I would say the best designers are able to create a shared ownership with the team. And I would say one of the my gauges for success when we're in meetings, when we're reviewing product ideas, I love seeing teams where anyone around that table can explain that idea and explain it in an authentic way that suggests that, oh, they feel they have ownership in this. So that would be a few, right? So it would be learning, how to work well with others, how to not feel so that you're the only owner of every good idea. And I think that comes from a thought that there's still originality, and I would not get bogged down by coming up with an original idea. Coming up with solutions that work, that's where the value is. And then, ultimately, get good at sort of leading at different levels and learning how to sell your idea. You don't have to have a design to sell an idea. Pitch them, right? Like, hey, what if, right? Or did we think about this? And it also takes time to, I think, seek out the people who are somewhat like-minded. They may not have your same skills, but they have the same desire, which is to kind of innovate and think differently and unlock, new forms of creativity in the organization. So those might be like the black sheep in the organization, but yeah, you'll find like-minded people if you ask.
Right. But some outliers that you think, you can vibe with, or that are you're maybe already speaking the same language with. Maybe they're, insiders who want to do something a little bit differently, and you can try to identify them and work alongside of them. We've talked a lot about the soft skills of design. And as you said, maybe not the design itself. Like, do you think if you flip the script and you're thinking, I might design lead now, and I have a team of designers with me, like, are those where you should be focusing your mentorship and kind of nurturing of team members along? Is it in that communication? Is that sales, getting along with people? Not to say that you want to forsake the technical design skills of actually putting a wireframe or visual comp together, but like, is that where you think maybe the gap of education is on the design side, and that's where you would focus your sort of mentoring or nurturing of designers on your team?
That's a great question. I mean, I do quite a bit of mentoring, and in fact, I just recently gave a talk at a local college here in Utah, and what I sensed was that for the most part, in the sort of the traditional design school, there's still a very traditional curriculum, where it's you learn the basics, typography, grid, color, etc. There's maybe some curriculum around interaction design, but I've never gotten the sense that it's very comprehensive. And then ultimately, it's like you deliver a portfolio, and along the way, you get a lot of kind of feedback through, criticism, right? It's like, okay, and that to me was it seems very traditional, right? But that's not really the way it works nowadays. You'll definitely get feedback, you'll get criticism, right? But you have to be able to, and this is one of the things I think I see people struggle with. They think that the design is the thing they're being hired for, when really that's assumed that you can do that really well, right? What we're really looking for, and I think what other, especially fast moving startups are looking for, is, can you think through a problem? So design to me is not primarily an aesthetic problem, but obviously a lot of people in the organization look at it that way. And I think a lot of designers still look at their value that way. And those are the designers I typically see move laterally. They end up kind of finding themselves in kind of glorified pixel pusher type careers. What design leaders need to do to move up to the higher levels is to get good at solving problems. And what that means is you have to get really deep in the weeds. So you have to do, in some ways, your own competitive intelligence. You have to learn about all the ways that you shouldn't solve this problem. So for me, design oftentimes is a search problem. And sometimes you have the information you need to perform that search and you work your algorithm. Other times you need more. And then ultimately, as you get better, you're going to be working with teams, and you have to teach them to see how to solve that problem. And that's a muscle that is hard to build because it requires a lot of trust, right? So a lot of times there's a pressure component, right? There's resource constraints, and you're put in a room and you've got a whiteboard up there and you're sketching stuff out, and like, we have to come up with an answer. Well, one, what's the question you're trying to answer? And two, is that even the question you should be asking? So part of that development of becoming a good problem solver is the recognition that not all problems are the same. And so the way I think about this is that there are tame problems and there are wild problems. There are known and unknown. And so as you build your career and as you grow in experience, you start to, I think, intuitively sense the difference between these problems. And just very briefly, I would think of like a known problem as one where best practices exist. So if there are books or great website articles written about this, or you could point to some really good sites that do it well, you're done. That's a known problem. So your job in that case is to simply explore different ways to incrementally improve it or make it fit within, the context that you're designing for. But when you're moving into a startup and you're trying to be disruptive and innovative, well, that's where you're, by definition, in a unknown or knowable problem space. Those are where the wild problems exist. And that requires different approaches, different leadership skills, and, developing even different interpersonal skills. We could definitely dive into those, but that's a lot.
Well, I'm just kind of curious. It's like you mentioned trust. It takes time. I think it's easy for people to sort of glom onto the hard skills that you learn in a program, and problem solving, depending on the length of the program, is probably going to be short circuited in some way, shape, or form. So you have to get this experience within your organization, kind of hunt out some of these wilder problems, right? And sort of dive in. And it's like, if I'm a designer and I'm interested in being a lead, I need to be curious about that. You mentioned this sort of like horizontal movement you see amongst a lot of designers, and then certain people that are able to like level up or continue to level up. Like if I'm a designer now and I'm interested in that, what I would think, what do I do? Because I'm tasked with A, B, and C, and that doesn't always fall into the really interesting, it falls into the more known universe. Like, what's advice you give to designers outside of kind of being curious and asking the right questions, which I think are good ones? Like, what would you say to your team about, hey, this is, how you can ensure you have a bright future in design and a bright future as a design leader? Here's some, I don't know if they're tactical things, Chris, or if they're,
I could boil that
more
down
nebulous.
to,
I'm kind of curious.
I could boil that down to one piece of advice, which is, as you're saying yes to things, a creative life starts with yes, right? So saying yes to some of those things, which you may not feel totally comfortable with, but putting in the work and then being able to explain to anybody why you made the decisions you made. This is often overlooked. And I don't know exactly why that is. I don't know if it's just never been taught. It's a discipline problem, or it's a part of an imposter syndrome. Like I don't trust, like I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? It's one of those situations where I see people with the opportunity to grow and to move up or build trust in the organization. They ultimately devalue their own work because they can't explain why they do what they do. So I think I would ask this of designers when I either all the way back when I was working in newspapers or, every day at work, if someone chooses something, let's say you have a design system, right? And they go off the design system. Great. Why? What did the design system not provide, that you found necessary to go off of it? Most of the times what I'll hear is, I was just kind of bored. That's not a great way to build trust, and confidence in your design skills. It's tough as a younger designer because you don't have enough experience to have sort of that natural internal compass that points you in the right direction. And so you can't evaluate very quickly what's right and what's not. So one of the exercises I give is, if you have a design system, start there. If you're just starting out with, understanding typography, color, interaction, etc., start with the simplest thing. Use one typeface, use one color. When I was growing up, my dad and brother are jazz musicians, and one of our exercises, we met once with a famous jazz drummer, Max Roach, and I remember one of the best lessons I learned from him as it applied to design, obviously to music, was we're just going to take our drumstick and we're going to play one kind of beat. We're going to use either this block or this drum. We're not going to use the whole drum set. How much music can you make playing one note on the piano, playing using one stick on a drum or on a cymbal? And it was all about focusing on what's the most interesting rhythm we can make. And how do we make that rhythm if it's just on one instrument? Well, or one piece of the instrument. Well, there's cadence, intonation, there's, volume, there's different sorts of syncopation, right? There's all these different things. You have to be able to explore in a smaller space because the world is flooding you with all of these great tools and all of this variety. And it's very hard to turn away from that. But you have to sort of build that internal discipline so that you can start building that large library of knowledge that helps you understand why you do what you do. Very a real easy way to counteract that is to say, um, I'm not going to change anything unless it's obvious that it's not working. And so if it's not, I'm going to change it in a specific way. So I think one of the things that makes design really complicated is there's almost a continuum of options, and then it's combined with other options. So there's a massive amount of combinations to explore in design. So you have to actively keep making it a very small, finite number of things, and then learn from those and then build on those concepts. So it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's, you want to be, just stuffing your face at the buffet all the time, but you have to be kind of disciplined. And the way I do it is say, can I explain why I did this? Can I rationalize this?
Yep.
And is it based on something that's well understood? And if not, then I have to be ready to explain that. I don't know if that helps.
Oh, no,
but
100%.
That's how I do it.
No, I think it's super interesting and super helpful, because I think as creative professionals, we think we have to bring the full toolkit, kind of got to bring maybe the bazooka sometimes and everything we have to solve a problem. And I think I like to tell my team that like design at least the design we do, it requires constraints, right? And a lot of those are going to be put upon us as external constraints. I think what you're mentioning here is like, this is almost an internal constraint. You have to constrain your thinking, boil it down to the very basics. And I think, as you said, what it enables you to do is then you can explain why you made every single design decision that you made, as opposed to, I got bored, which I don't think a lot of designers will always admit to. So you have some folks on your team who are very upfront and honest. I saw it here, or it seemed like a good idea. But as you strip it back, like, you don't have any choice there. And I think that's it's almost the opposite of a creative approach I think a lot of people will take these days, is more is more, as opposed to kind of less is more. Let's start there.
I love the point that you brought up around constraints, because I think that many feel like that's a bad word, but really creativity is not useful without constraints. Creativity is about solving problems, and problems have constraints. If you're being creative without constraints, I would suggest that's called art, right? And unless that's the business you're in, it's really hard to bring value to whatever project you're doing. So the internal constraint or the external constraints, you have to embrace those. In fact, I love this. There's this Chinese proverb I read in a book by a psychologist out of Stanford, and it was, before we slay the beast, we must first make it beautiful. And I love that sentiment, which is, you have to fall in love with the problem. You have to fall in love with the constraints. And until you do, you'll never understand the problem you're trying to solve. And that's where you really bring value.
I couldn't agree more. I think well said, and appreciate that. Chris, I want to wrap up here, but want to see, are there any other pieces of advice that you'd like to offer the, either designers who are looking to become leaders or current leaders, and how to continue kind of excel their careers?
Yeah, there were two pieces of advice I would give. I think one, for just working better in an organization, which is, take every moment to learn how to sell your ideas. I think that's important, right? Every opportunity to say yes to something, to explain something, to see if it's working. A lot of times I find writing is really helpful. So can you write down your idea or your proposal in such a way that really gets people engaged? Sometimes we miss the fact that writing is a great part of the design process. Being able to articulate and use different kinds of metaphors helps unlock a lot of different sort of creative solutions. I think that's often missed. And then the second thing I would say is, as you start moving up the ranks, as you start becoming a more visible leader in the organization, realize that the higher up you go in the organization, the more your actions, your words are going to be amplified. There's sort of like a magnification effect that happens. So you have to be a lot more cognizant of the language you use, your body language. I see oftentimes people's words, or maybe just sort of the way they react in a meeting, gets completely misconstrued. They might just be a little tired, or it's been a long day, or they're a little hungry, and the design team is watching this leader, whether it's like a CTO or a CPO or something, and they're taking all of this, like these nonverbal signals back and saying, oh my gosh, they hate it. We've really failed, right? And then that changes how they present. The sooner you can relate to that point of being maybe more visible and understanding that what you do will be kind of amplified, will help you not fall into a few traps, but will also help you be more effective as a communicator, because you'll realize you don't have to go overboard, right? And you lead by action. And I think that's, you will find people will pick up on those cues, and you'll be a much more effective leader in that case.
Fantastic. I don't know if you have plans to write a book, but I think the design world could benefit from a book. The advice you're given just in the past 30 minutes is it's fantastic. It's really, that. I think, tactical and practical for new designers, and I think guides folks in a strategic way who are looking to be either new leaders or continue to grow their leaders. So I just want to immensely say thank you I can tell you truly care about this. You're passionate not just about design, but actually like building the next generation of design leaders that's needed in this world and in the design community. So I just want to thank you for your time today, but again, your energy and passion and guidance for designers.
Oh, same here, Mark. Thank you for reaching out. I really enjoyed the conversation.
You bet. All right, Chris, thanks again for your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Safe travels.